Hi, I'm Jenny Champeau, the director of the Book of Mormon Art Catalog, and I'm here today with Micah Christensen. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks. So Micah is a scholar of European, Asian, and American fine art and decorative objects. He earned his doctorate in the history of art from University College London. He's a partner at Anthony's Fine Art and Antiques, and that's actually where we are here today in Salt Lake City, and co-author of the Dictionary of Utah Fine Artists. And in 2016, Micah co-founded the Zion Art Society and Zion Art Podcast, documenting the careers of LDS artists, which I highly recommend. It's a great podcast. Today we're looking at the scriptures in Mosiah chapters 1 through 3. And the piece that we're looking at is by Arnold Freeberg. It shows King Benjamin and Mosiah. It's from the early 1950s. And this is a graphite on paper, so a drawing. Micah, can you first tell us a little bit about how you found this piece? And I know there's a whole collection of his drawings that you've worked with.
That's right. So we were thrilled to get, we feel like we kind of saved them from destruction, about 300 Book of Mormon drawings. Wow.
And I know you've done some scholarly work in trying to contextualize and just figure out what it is.
That's right.
All the pieces represent. You've done a couple of publications on this, right?
Yes, we did an exhibition when it first, when we first got all of the things that we had. So the image that we've got in front of us of Benjamin and Mosiah, and it's actually annotated, it's got his handwriting on it, King Benjamin and Mosiah, dates from the first 8 paintings.
So the same time period.
So this is, yes, so this is from the period of before he's working with David O. McKay.
So he was doing all these sketches, maybe trying out different scenes.
That's right.
Okay.
And he's going page by page.
Wow.
He's literally going, you can literally see, and he's annotating the images by saying, you know, Omni chapter 1, verse 6. Okay. And this one does not have a specific scripture because it does relate to Mosiah chapters 1 through 3, but it doesn't, it's his own invention of a scene.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really interesting because he called himself an illustrator. And illustration by definition, at least my definition and the way that I think classically trained artists think of it like he did, was that illustration rather than fine art is text dependent.
Okay.
Right? And so there are literal illustrations of text, and then there are more abstract interpretations of a text. So this is an abstract interpretation.
Yeah.
In the scriptures, we know that Benjamin is a direct descendant of the scripture guardians, the plate guardians, right? Whatever we want to call them.
Sure, yeah.
Those who have inherited the responsibility from Nephi down to keep a record of the Nephites and the people, and they're also, not always, but often the rulers. So we know that Benjamin arrives in this land where he's got to defend his people. It says he fights with his own sword. Right. This is right before Mosiah 1, right? It talks about just briefly this kind of like young Benjamin. And then we open up with Mosiah 1 where he first tells his sons about the responsibility of the plates and ruling. And then he talks in 2 and 3 to his people as he's retiring and passing on the kingdom to Mosiah.
Right.
So in that speech, he says, in chapters 2 and 3, he says, I defended, even with my own sword, our freedom. But he said, if you could always have, he said, I've been a king who has never taxed you with a heavy burden.
Yeah, but he's
and in fact, I've labored for my own sustenance, for my own needs. Right. Right. And Freeberg's interpretation of this is brilliant because what he has is he has old King Benjamin with a small garden and a garden hoe.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that interpretation.
Just kind of propped there, like he's just set it down and sitting in his chair, coming in from the garden.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't say. Yeah. It doesn't say in the scriptures, and you didn't feed me, and I had my own garden, and I didn't tax you guys to give me food, right? Yeah. No, it's the interpretation is from Freeburg is that King Benjamin is ruling the country as this kind of Roman ideal of an early general who retires from the farm to defend the people and then goes back to the farm when he's done.
Oh yeah,
like Numa, the Roman general.
Was it Cincinnatus? Didn't he?
Cincinnatus did that too, apparently, right? Yeah. It's the idea that he is this. He's this the ultimate ideal of a selfless leader.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there, and the younger Mosiah, who doesn't have a chair, comes and kneels down. Yeah. And what I don't know here is whether or not the idea is that it says that after Benjamin gives his speech in chapter 3 and gives the people a new name, essentially kind of covenanting, giving them a new covenant as God's people. That he also gives them Mosiah as their king, who's this theocratic prophet, seer, revelator, we know because of his later experience, who's a righteous king. But we know he lives for 3 more years. Yeah. Benjamin does after that. And I wonder if this is one of those moments when, this is how I interpreted it.
Okay.
Benjamin's old. He's retired. He's gone back to the vegetable patch, and Mosiah has been king and is coming back for counsel.
Oh, interesting.
That's how I interpret it.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So he's already one's retired and he's sitting there with the thought.
Yeah.
This Benjamin. It's almost as if Mosiah is saying, "Okay, Dad." What would you have done in this situation?
Yeah.
I need your counsel.
And you can see Benjamin he's not looking at Mosiah. He's lost in his own thoughts.
That's right.
Maybe Mosiah's delivering this message. Yeah.
I mean, this is conjecture.
Sure.
I'm sure there's room for all kinds of interpretation in this.
I also wondered if this could be that moment in Mosiah 1 where Benjamin has called Mosiah to him to tell him, you're going to now be the protector of the plates and the Liahona and the sword of Laban, and I want you to be the next king, and I want you to call the people together. So yeah,
I could see that interpretation too.
Yeah, but I like what you're saying about how he seems to be thinking about something he wants to say.
There's also another aspect here that I wish, this is one of my greatest regrets in his estate. He left behind his National Geographics.
Okay.
And I didn't think much of them at the time. And then I saw somebody who did buy them. And he has in them all of these pieces of paper where he highlights a belt that he saw in an Aztec illustration. Because what happens is when he really gets into those last 4, is he goes, he asks David O. McKay what his interpretation of who the Nephites and Lamanites were. And he says, go talk to the anthropologists at BYU. And the head of the anthropology department says, I don't know who the Nephites and Lamanites were. I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
Right? How do I know?
Yeah.
Right? And so Arnold says he went back and no one was going to tell him what the Liahona actually looked like. They weren't going to tell him the size. They weren't going to tell him the materials. They weren't going to tell him any of that stuff.
We just don't know.
But he had to actually paint it. And so it was on him. And he said he knew the moment he won that battle when he went to a fireside in his stake. And Bruce R. McConkie, who is very scriptorian, right, shows up with a replica of the Liahona that had been in Arnold Freeburg's painting and held it up and said to everybody, this is what the Liahona looked like.
Oh.
And Arnold laughed and said, not until I told you what it looked like.
That is amazing.
Right? And so he pieces together from the National Geographic all of these costumes and all of these figures. And he said he tried to solve the problem of what Nephites and Lamanites looked like by creating a spiritual race. Which when people tell me, oh, they all look like muscle men, I say, well, he called them spiritual Olympians. Yeah. In his mind. These guys are kind of that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Mosiah a little more. You can see the muscles there on the arms. But it's symbolic, right? That
it's symbolic.
Their spiritual strength. That he's, again, this try to make it very easy to read and illustrative so that you can look at it.
That's
and
right.
It makes sense immediately to the viewer. Yeah.
I mean, it's the problem with an illustrator. I mean,
Yeah.
if you've got somebody who's an abstract artist or someone who's going towards the abstract,
Well, yeah.
but because he goes abstract in the racial sense towards this idea of a spiritual race, and when I say race, I don't mean race as in black and white,
Right.
or in the terms that we use it today, but I mean in the terms that he used it, which was they're not Scandinavian, they're not Anglo-Saxon, they're not French, they're not German, they're not African, they're not Aztecs, they're not Mayans, they're this other group. Then he also gets caught in the trap of the hairdos from the 1950s.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because that's what
yeah.
he was going with.
I think this is so fascinating, Micah, because it is an important reminder that artists are making choices and
Yeah.
that there's so much that we just don't know. And when artists are asked to depict it, they have to fill in the blanks a lot of times.
Right.
And I think as viewers, it's important for us to keep that in mind that these aren't photographs. This is one artist's interpretation, and there may be other ways to visualize it.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And he's going to get flack, and he got flack,
Yeah.
and he still gets flack.
Yeah.
And this one didn't end up in the reproduction, so you
Yeah.
can imagine on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to say, okay, you never really thought that a conversation with a garden hoe
Yeah.
between Benjamin and Mosiah would be one of 12 images to represent the Book of Mormon.
Right.
But it says a lot about how it's almost as if he's a method actor.
Okay.
And he's getting into the scriptures as much as possible, and he's scribbling, and something like this he would have done in a couple hours.
Really?
That's a couple hour sketch.
I really love that it is different from the 12 paintings that we all know, that there is this familial focus, which I think is important in the Book of Mormon, is a theme throughout the Book of Mormon, this, like you said, passing down this trust of the plates and care of the people and the gospel. And I love the introspection and the just relationship depicted here. It's different than what we see in his paintings, and so it's really fun to see this. And we're also really grateful to you for allowing us to put this in the Book of Mormon art catalog. And
happy to do it.
If you want to see more of Arnold Freeberg's drawings, Micah has allowed us to put them in the Book of Mormon art catalog. We have a couple hundred in there, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So you can check them out there.
We're thrilled to do it. I mean, we just see ourselves as temporary stewards of these things, right? And so some of these they're not major works of art, but I think they add to the development of our visual history, right?
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. They're an important document of our history, and just another, it made me think about these scriptures in a way that I hadn't before. So I'm grateful to you for talking to us today about it.
Thrilled to do it. Yeah, it's fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.